welcome back to another episode of the Stay-at-Home Mom, and I want to do a response to a message that I got from some strange guy on Facebook. So what I assume prompted him to message me was from a public Facebook page. Julie Borowski, she's someone I followed for a few years, had posted an article about changing the time of mandated education to like 7 or 8. And most of the comments were really positive. She's a kind of a libertarian, so people and generally are going to be in favor of, no government, more in favor of homeschooling. And of course, like, I read comments and I comment back and respond to people, like, kind of like usually positive stuff, and then I point out people like where maybe they might be incorrect in their assumptions. And of course there was like the one person that she had a positive thing about homeschooling, and then like one of her responses from people was like bringing up the whole socialization thing that we hear over and over again. And like I kind of responded back to that and some of this other like accusations he had said. And I made the assumption that he was a public school teacher. And part of my response included that I was a public school teacher that quit to homeschool my children. And I expressed some of those concerns I had, especially those regarding socialization, because of bullying and the risk of sexual assault and things like that. And then somehow part of the comment thing, it turned into he made some kind of comment about religious people homeschooling and things like that. So I responded back to that and I was like, well, yeah, I don't want the government schools imposing their atheist world view on my children. And my children thinking that they're just a bunch of stardust that evolved into bacteria and their ancestors were, bacteria basically. And if you've seen any of my other videos, my religious beliefs were not ever the main motivation to why I decided to homeschool. It was what I was witnessing firsthand working in education that I was like, I'm not doing this with my children. Watch the video, 5 Reasons I Quit Teaching. So this I assumed he was an atheist. I think he was probably more an agnostic or a skeptic. Private messaged me these 10 videos from famous atheists, mostly from Matt Dillahunty or something, and I've watched some of his stuff before. And his thing was, get educated before you teach innocent children. And I was like, I kind of thought, well, do I just normally I just block when I get strange messages from people, I don't respond to them, I just block it. Usually just because it's really weird, and I don't know, I feel really uncomfortable strange people doing that, unless I was in a Facebook group and they private messaged me or something. It'd be a little different. Anyway, so I kind of just I kind of responded back to that with something about I was like, I'm very well educated, thank you. I've come to believe what I believe by studying several years ago, and came to the conclusion that, Christianity is true. And that is true. I studied a lot on both sides. Not that I was a total skeptic, but I really did examine to see what I believed was true, and that I realized I don't have blind faith. I know why I believe what I believe. And anyway, so he kind of I let him respond back once. And I'd also said something about, are you gonna, I could just send you a whole bunch of videos of, and I listed well over 10 well-known Christian philosophers and apologists, and from people from Ray Comfort to C.S. Lewis and a whole bunch of others. And for whatever reason, he called out Ray Comfort, and he was going on about how they're biased they are and that they're all dishonest and stuff. And I was like, I can say the exact same thing about the people that you sent me. I was like, there's a reason I can't stand Dillahunty, but I can listen to Hitchens. there's a difference in people and what they say and do. So what kind of stuck out to me was was part of his response is, and I believe this was because I only let him have a second response, and then I responded, and then I kind of blocked after that. But he said, "You seem to have a lot of uneducated problems with public schools. You do realize what you said about them is a higher risk at home. The difference is, as I said already, is accountability. What we should teach our children is to be better than us parents. When you say the state or the government, it's actually us. This special country is we the people by the people. It's not some conspiracy theory entity against us." Like, what kind of statist nonsense is that? My uneducated problems with public schools are what I witnessed firsthand. It's what friends and family have told me. And honestly, some of the stuff that they witnessed, I didn't witness and almost would find unbelievable if I didn't trust that person. The risk of being like abused. Like, I don't abuse my children. Okay. And I pretty much don't leave them around people. I don't know. Because I had mentioned something about them being, these teachers are just putting my children in the hands of strangers for 13 years. And he's like, these aren't strangers. They're background checked and, qualified. Yeah, that's why the teacher next door to me one year had accusations brought against him. Totally why sex abuse just hardly ever happens in public schools. Accountability. Like, okay, I'm part of 3 homeschooling communities, like, and I got friends and family. I think accountability is there. And then teaching our children to be better than us parents. Well, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. But the state or the government is us. That whole nonsense of we the people, by the people, for the people stuff, that's, part of the founding documents. Like, that's kind of a joke at this point, because I didn't vote for most of those people. Like 95% of the people in office, I have no say in the curriculum that I taught children or how really to do it a lot. Like, no, there is no we get to decide what to do. No, it is a bunch of bureaucrats, and especially in education, a lot of them are unelected bureaucrats making a whole bunch of these decisions. So kind of what I kept doing was I put the same standard back on him and stuff like that. And I was like, I kept saying according to what standard, because to me, a lot of times, like, there's morality, and the morality that are in public schools would not necessarily always match up with what I would want to instill in my children. And especially, I can't control what other children say to my children for 15,000 hours of their life when they aren't with me. And he seemed to think that I don't know. I think he had more of an issue. I don't know. As someone else said to me, he's like, he seems to have a less of an issue with your religion than more than your freedom and your liberty. And he seems right on that. He also said at one point, because I kind of like based on advice from someone else, was like, what if I told you I'm against you teaching your children there is no God? And he's like, oh, you should be. Like, someone should be. He just had it in his mind that, I don't know, that I'm brainwashed, I'm uneducated, and that somehow I shouldn't teach my children truths. Because I'm like, here's the truth, I'm going to teach it my children. He was like, kept insinuating that, well, I shouldn't like tell my children that stuff, that I should point them to the evidence and let them come up with their own. And here's the thing is, truth is absolute. It's not something that can be exclusive. It is inclusive. Like, truth is truth. There is no way. And I had said, I've examined the same evidence as you, and I came to a very different conclusion. But yeah, he kept wanting me to think that I should come to the same conclusion to him, that somehow if everyone examines the evidence, we'll come to the same conclusion. Well, that's baloney. You have scientists all the time that will take a piece of evidence and they can come to very different conclusions. And you see that with scientists that have a more atheistic worldview and with scientists that have a more intellectual design creationist worldview, can take the evidence and interpret it very differently. And that's kind of a whole nother thing, because a lot of focus is on morality. Like, science cannot prove morality. Like, there is no way scientifically to prove why hurting people is wrong. Like, the materialist just kind of a lot of times has to say, well, hurting people hurts the growth and development of species, therefore it's wrong. Okay. No, because then people hurt people because they have a sinfulness in them, in their flesh, that they have a desire to want to do wrong, which is based on kind of a biblical world view. Okay, I don't believe people are just born innocent. Like, certain things can cause them to do certain things, sure. But anyway, and he also said, no parent should teach their children unjustifiable beliefs, just like a teacher shouldn't. And if they do, they will be fired. Unfortunately, a parent can't. That's like some straight up, like, I don't know, Bolshevik nonsense of that unfortunately a parent can't. And oh man, the tragedy of a parent instilling their beliefs and their morality on their children. Oh my goodness, instead of the state doing it. Because we somehow think that the state is this neutral entity. It's not. It's an agnostic, atheist, secular entity. And for a Christian, there is no neutrality. We should not have to give up our presuppositions to be at level ground with people that don't share the same worldview. Like, why do they get to hold on to their presuppositions, but a Christian or anyone of any faith would have to? Like, that's not how that works. Unjustifiable beliefs. So he was making the argument that my beliefs of Christianity was unjustifiable, when I had even said that I studied and came to the conclusion that Christianity is true. But somehow I can't justify it. There are, for 2,000 years, there have been people saying the same things for the most part. You have hundreds of thousands of scholars over the centuries, philosophers that have done an amazing job justifying Christianity. You've got some really bad ones too, I'll admit. But he's saying a teacher shouldn't do that, or they will be fired. Well, if a teacher is coming from a non-biblical worldview, and he or she is trying to justify beliefs, like from according to what standard? Like, if they're saying don't hit your friend, that's not nice. Why? Why is it not nice? What standard is she supposed to follow? You tell kids to follow the golden rule. Well, where did that golden rule, many people have said it, but it's also grounded in the Bible. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, which that was said even before Jesus became manifested in human flesh over 2,000 years ago. It was written down by Moses. Love your neighbor as yourself. The whole do unto others as they have done to you. And the reason is why? Well, because God is love. God gets to set the standard. When you're a Christian, you believe what God says. He is your standard. So a teacher doesn't have to explain why you shouldn't hit someone other than it's not nice. So she doesn't have to justify her beliefs, but yet as a parent that's a Christian, I would have to justify my beliefs. I didn't have to justify my beliefs when I was teaching, and pretty much the majority of everyone I've ever taught with would probably profess to believe in God to some degree. And I think I worked with a lot of Christians. Very few teachers that I've known would fall somewhere on the agnostic spectrum. I don't ever met an atheist teacher, so if they were there, I don't know. They get fired, but a parent can't. Like, he's just, he's insinuating that, like, it's almost like he's insinuating that the parent should be able to be fired for teaching morality to their children. Like, it was kind of insane. So, I don't know. I blocked him because I don't have time to put my mind and, like, sitting there thinking about a response, because that's what my brain will do, and then it distracts me from educating my children and thinking about God. Like, it can be an idol for me, and sometimes it still is, which is probably why I'm making a video on it, because I got to get it off my, I got to get it out of my head somehow. So, anyway, so like I said, I'm going to link to my videos and explain that. And I want to say I did post this something about in a secular group, and I did get one positive comment back from a atheist that said he was an atheist and he heard me on the podcast, Homesteads and Homeschooling, or Homeschooling and Homesteads. I just forgot what it was. And I'll post a link to that in this video. Check out that podcast. It's a great podcast. And anyway, I was interviewed on that. And he said, I was really impressed how little your religion played in your decision to homeschool, and that he admired that. And he said, you have, you've won this battle compared to this guy. And I really appreciate that, because I have found that people that in the homeschooling community that believe different than me as a whole tend to still be supportive of the fact that you are homeschooling, even if what we're doing is different and our motivations are different. Like, good for you for homeschooling your children. And I feel the same way towards anyone that believes different than me. Like, good for you in homeschooling your children, and I want to wish you the best of luck, even though we definitely share different worldviews, and I would not agree with you on many things educating your children. I'm still, like, thankful that you're doing it, and I think that is absolutely wonderful. So don't forget to subscribe. Check me out on Facebook and Instagram at the Stay at Home Mom.